If you feel overwhelmed, mentally tired, distracted, or emotionally reactive, there's a good chance the problem isn't your life. It's how your mind has been trained to respond to life. Most people never question this. They assume stress is normal. Anxiety is unavoidable. Anger is justified. Distraction is just part of modern living. But none of that is actually true. It's conditioning. Quiet, invisible conditioning that shapes how you react before you even realize what's happening. We live in a world that rewards comfort, speed, and stimulation. Everything is designed to remove friction. One click. One swipe. One shortcut. One distraction after another. Over time, your mind adapts to this environment. It becomes impatient. It becomes reactive. It becomes dependent on comfort and validation. And without noticing, something important weakens. Your mental resilience. This is why small inconveniences feel overwhelming. This is why criticism hits harder than it should. This is why silence feels uncomfortable. This is why boredom feels unbearable. This is why many people feel exhausted even when they're doing very little. The Stoics identified this problem centuries ago, long before screens, algorithms, and constant noise. They understood something most people today never learn: the quality of your life depends less on what happens to you, and more on how your mind responds to what happens. Marcus Aurelius wrote that you have power over your mind, not over external events. That single idea carries more weight than most modern self-help advice combined. Because it places responsibility where it actually belongs. Not on the world. Not on other people. On you. Here is a truth most people avoid. A weakly trained mind becomes easy to disturb, easy to anger, easy to discourage, and easy to control. But the opposite is also true. A disciplined mind becomes steady. Clear. Unshakable. Stoicism is not about suppressing emotion or escaping life. It is about training the mind to meet reality without collapsing under it. It is about building internal strength so external chaos loses its power. In this video, we're going to break down 9 brutal Stoic laws. These are not comforting ideas. They won't flatter you. They won't promise quick relief. But they will rewire how you think, how you respond, and how you move through the world. Each law is designed to strengthen a specific weakness modern life quietly creates. If you stay until the end, you won't just understand Stoicism better. You'll start seeing your reactions differently. You'll notice where your power leaks. And more importantly, you'll know how to reclaim it. Here is the custom Stoic truth that will guide this entire video. The mind is either trained by life, or it is trained by discipline. One of them will always win. Let's begin. Modern life treats discomfort like a disease. Anything uncomfortable is labeled as harmful, unnecessary, or something to be eliminated as quickly as possible. Hunger must be avoided. Cold must be avoided. Boredom must be avoided. Effort must be minimized. Friction must be removed. At first, this seems like progress. But psychologically, it creates a serious problem. When discomfort disappears from daily life, so does resilience. The Stoics understood this clearly. They didn't see discomfort as something to fear. They saw it as training. As preparation. As a necessary pressure that strengthens the mind the same way resistance strengthens muscle. Avoidance weakens you. Not because discomfort is pleasant, but because avoiding it teaches your mind that difficulty is dangerous. Over time, the mind adapts to comfort. It becomes sensitive. Reactive. Less tolerant of stress. Small challenges start feeling heavy. Minor inconveniences feel overwhelming. And when real hardship eventually arrives, because it always does, the mind isn't ready. Stoicism reverses this pattern. Instead of asking how to remove discomfort, it asks how to use it. Discomfort becomes a controlled environment where you practice staying calm, focused, and deliberate. Not because you enjoy it, but because it strengthens your internal discipline. Marcus Aurelius wrote that obstacles don't block the path, they become the path. This wasn't poetic language. It was practical instruction. Difficulty is not an interruption. It is the training ground. When you choose discomfort deliberately, you send a message to your mind. I can stay steady even when conditions are not ideal. That message matters. It builds resilience before you need it. Discomfort, in Stoic philosophy, is not punishment. It is preparation. It teaches you that you don't collapse when things aren't comfortable. You don't lose control when effort is required. You don't panic when routine breaks. This law rewires your mind by changing your relationship with difficulty. Instead of reacting emotionally, you begin responding intentionally. You stop asking life to be easier. You start training yourself to be stronger. And strength, once built, does not disappear when conditions change. Most people believe emotions are uncontrollable. They say things like, "I couldn't help it," or, "That's just how I felt," as if emotions are external forces acting on them. Stoicism challenges this assumption directly. The Stoics never taught that emotions should be eliminated. They taught that emotions should not be allowed to command behavior. There is a crucial difference. Emotion is a signal. Impulse is a reaction. And between the two, there is a space most people never use. That space is where self-command lives. Epictetus explained that events themselves do not disturb us. What disturbs us is our judgment about them. This means the emotion is not caused directly by reality, but by interpretation. Modern life collapses that space. Everything is immediate. Notifications demand response. Messages invite reaction. Stress triggers impulse. Over time, you begin responding instead of reacting. You regain control not by fighting emotion, but by refusing to let it rush you. This law rewires your mind by restoring internal authority. You stop being dragged by impulse. You start choosing your response. And a person who chooses their response is never powerless. Few beliefs cause more unnecessary suffering than the idea that life should be fair. That effort should always be rewarded. That good intentions should always be recognized. That honesty should protect you. That people should behave reasonably. Stoicism does not reject morality, but it rejects entitlement. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that he would encounter selfishness, dishonesty, ingratitude, and hostility. Not because something was wrong with the world, but because this is part of human nature. By accepting this in advance, he removed surprise from disappointment. Most people do the opposite. They expect fairness first, then feel betrayed when reality fails to deliver it. The pain doesn't come only from what happens. It comes from the expectation that it shouldn't have happened. Stoicism replaces expectation with realism. Life is not a courtroom. It does not operate on justice. It operates on cause and effect. On probability. On human behavior. When you stop expecting fairness, you stop being shocked by difficulty. You stop taking hardship personally. You stop handing emotional control to circumstances you never controlled to begin with. This doesn't make you cynical. It makes you resilient. Instead of asking, "Why me?" the Stoic asks, "What now?" Instead of waiting for recognition, the Stoic focuses on conduct. Instead of demanding fairness, the Stoic demand strength from themselves. This law rewires your mind by removing emotional dependency on outcomes you don't control. It anchors your stability internally. And when fairness does appear, when effort is rewarded or honesty is returned, you appreciate it as a gift, not an expectation. Strength Begi. NS where entitlement ends. A large portion of modern anxiety comes from one mistake. Trying to control what was never yours to control. People worry about outcomes before effort. They obsess over opinions they can't shape. They replay the past as if it can be edited. They imagine futures that haven't arrived and may never exist. All of this drains mental energy. Not because life is overwhelming, but because attention is misdirected. Stoicism draws a sharp, disciplined line between two categories. What belongs to you, and what does not. Your thoughts, your choices, your actions, your effort, these are yours. Other people's behavior, their approval, the final result of your work, timing, luck, these are not. When the mind ignores this distinction, anxiety grows. When the mind respects it, clarity returns. Most people feel overwhelmed because they mentally carry responsibilities that were never theirs. They take ownership of reactions, outcomes, and opinions they cannot command. This creates constant tension, a sense of failure even when they've done their part. Stoicism teaches you to release that weight. Not emotionally. Rationally. When you focus only on what you control, your mind stops negotiating with chaos. It stops arguing with reality. It stops resisting what cannot be changed. This does not make you passive. It makes you precise. You act fully where your influence exists. You disengage where it doesn't. And in doing so, you conserve energy, sharpen judgment, and reduce unnecessary suffering. The Stoic mind becomes calm not because life becomes predictable, but because attention becomes disciplined. This law rewires your mind by narrowing its focus to what actually matters. When attention stays in its proper lane, anxiety has nowhere to grow. You don't need control over everything. You only need control over yourself. And that is always available. Most people move through life hoping difficulty never arrives. They organize their routines around comfort. They avoid anything that feels demanding. They postpone effort until conditions feel right. And as long as life stays smooth, this approach seems harmless. Until it doesn't. Hardship does not announce itself. It arrives uninvited. And when it does, the mind that avoided difficulty has no defense. The Stoics refuse to live this way. They believe strength should be built before it is needed, not during crisis. This is why they practiced voluntary hardship not as punishment, but as preparation. Voluntary hardship is the deliberate choice to experience controlled difficulty while conditions are safe. It trains the mind to remain steady under pressure, long before real pressure appears. Comfort weakens because it removes resistance. Without resistance, discipline atrophies. The mind becomes dependent on ease. And dependency creates fragility. Stoicism reverses this by introducing chosen difficulty. Not extreme. Not reckless. Deliberate and measured. When you choose hardship intenti only, you teach your mind something critical. I do not break simply because something is uncomfortable. This lesson compounds. Each act of discipline strengthens the will slightly. Each moment of restraint reinforces self-command. Over time, the mind stops associating difficulty with danger. It begins associating it with growth. Voluntary hardship is not about suffering. It is about independence. It frees you from needing perfect conditions. It makes your stability portable. You carry it with you instead of depending on your environment to provide it. This law rewires your mind by restoring confidence in your own endurance. You stop fearing effort. You stop avoiding pressure. You stop waiting for motivation. You become reliable to yourself. And a person who can rely on themselves is difficult to shake. One of the most subtle traps of the modern mind is attachment to outcomes. People want certainty before effort. Results before patience. Guarantees before commitment. When progress is slow or unpredictable, they become discouraged, not because the work is impossible, but because their identity is tied to results. Stoicism breaks this attachment. Not by lowering standards, but by relocating value. The Stoics believed your worth lies in your conduct, not in the final outcome. Effort is yours. Results belong to chance, timing, and external forces. When you attach your sense of self to outcomes, every delay feels like failure. Every rejection feels personal. Every obstacle becomes a threat to identity. But when you attach yourself to the process, something changes. You show up consistently. You act with integrity regardless of recognition. You improve quietly without demanding immediate reward. Detachment from outcomes does not mean indifference. It means discipline without emotional dependency. You still aim high. You still care. But you don't allow uncertainty to destabilize you. The Stoic sees outcomes as information, not judgment. Data, not identity. This mindset produces a rare strength, the ability to continue when motivation fades, when feedback is absent, and when results are delayed. Consistency becomes character. This law rewires your mind by removing emotional volatility from progress. You stop oscillating between hope and disappointment. You settle into steady effort. And steady effort, sustained long enough, reshapes both skill and self. You stop chasing success. You start becoming someone capable of handling it. Most people live as if time is endless. They delay difficult decisions. They tolerate situations they know are wrong. They postpone growth, honesty, courage, and change. They assume there will always be another chance, another season, another moment when conditions feel right. This assumption quietly weakens the mind. The Stoics rejected it completely. They practiced memento mori, remembering death not to become fearful, but to become awake. To strip away illusion. To sharpen priorities. To restore urgency where comfort had dulled it. When you remember that life is finite, clarity increases. The unnecessary falls away. Petty concerns lose their grip. The opinions of others shrink in importance. Procrastination becomes harder to justify. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that every day could be his last. This was not pessimism. It was discipline. It forced him to act with intention instead of drifting through habit. Modern life encourages the opposite. Endless distraction creates the illusion of endless time. People stay busy, but not purposeful. Occupied, but not aligned. Memento mori interrupts this drift. It forces a simple question into your awareness. If time is limited, what actually deserves my attention? When this question is asked honestly, excuses collapse. Fear weakens. Priorities sharpen. Remembering death does not make life darker. It makes it precise. You stop wasting energy on resentment. You stop investing in shallow validation. You stop postponing meaningful action. You begin choosing deliberately. This law rewires your mind by restoring urgency without panic. It removes complacency without creating fear. It aligns action with what truly matters. You cannot control how long you live. But you can control whether you live deliberately. And once you see time clearly, you stop treating life casually. One of the strongest forces shaping human behavior is the desire to be accepted. Most people are more afraid of disapproval than dishonesty. More afraid of standing alone than betraying their own values. They adjust their beliefs, soften their boundaries, and silence their convictions to remain liked. Stoicism exposes the cost of this. When your sense of worth depends on approval, your identity becomes unstable. One criticism shakes you. One rejection unsettles you. One misunderstanding disturbs your peace. The Stoics built their identity on something far more durable, virtue. Virtue, in Stoic terms, is not moral perfection. It is alignment. Acting according to reason, integrity, and principle regardless of external response. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the worth of an action is determined by its correctness, not by applause. Epictetus taught that freedom begins the moment you stop outsourcing your self-respect. Approval is unpredictable. Values are not. When you live by approval, you perform. When you live by virtue, you become. This distinction matters. A person guided by virtue does not need constant reassurance. They do not bend under pressure. They do not require validation to stay consistent. Their standards come from within. Living this way is not loud. It is quiet. Often unseen. But it is powerful. Because when you stop chasing approval, fear loses leverage. You speak more honestly. You act more decisively. Stop explaining yourself unnecessarily. And paradoxically, this consistency often earns respect naturally, not because you seek it, but because people trust those who are not easily moved. This law rewires your mind by stabilizing your identity. Your self-worth stops fluctuating with opinion. You become grounded, principled, and internally secure. In a world driven by reaction, the person guided by values becomes rare. And rarity carries strength. Most people try to create peace by controlling their environment. They seek the right conditions, the right relationships, the right routines, the right recognition. They believe stability will come once everything outside aligns. Stoicism teaches the opposite. If your peace depends on external conditions, it is temporary by nature. Anything external can change, disappear, or be taken away. The Stoics focused on building something internal, an inner fortress. Marcus Aurelius called this the inner citadel, a stable, disciplined mental space that remains intact regardless of external chaos. Not isolation from the world, but independence from it. An inner fortress is built from habits, not hope. It is strengthened every time you pause before reacting. Every time you choose discipline over comfort. Every time you act according to principle rather than impulse. Every time you return your attention to what you control. Most people remain mentally exposed. Every comment enters. Every insult penetrates. Every delay destabilizes them. Their mind has no walls. The Stoic mind is different. It is not closed. It is protected. Building this fortress does not require withdrawing from life. It requires training how you meet life. Standards become boundaries. Boundaries become stability. Stability becomes freedom. Solitude strengthens the fortress. Reflection reinforces it. Routine maintains it. Self-command guards the gates. This law rewires your mind by establishing sovereignty. You no longer hand control to circumstance. You no longer outsource emotional authority. The world can change. People can leave. Plans can collapse. Your center remains intact. And a person who has built an inner fortress does not fear uncertainty. They are prepared for it. If you step back and look closely, you'll see that these 9 laws are not separate ideas. They are different angles of the same truth. A truth most people avoid because it demands responsibility. That truth is this. Your strength is not determined by what happens to you. It is determined by how trained your mind is when it happens. Every Stoic law you've heard points to that single reality. Discomfort was never about pain. It was about preparation. Emotional control was never about suppression. It was about authority. Fairness was never promised. Strength was required. Control was never external. It was always internal. Hardship was never punishment. It was conditioning. Outcomes were never identity. Effort was. Death was never morbid. It was clarifying. Approval was never security. Virtue was. The inner fortress was never isolation. It was sovereignty. When these laws come together, something changes quietly but permanently. You stop asking life to cooperate before you feel stable. You stop needing people to behave a certain way before you stay calm. You stop waiting for perfect conditions before acting. You become internally consistent. And internal consistency is real power. This is what Stoicism actually trains. Not toughness for show. Not emotional numbness. Not superiority. But self-command. The ability to remain steady when pressure appears. To think clearly when emotion rises. To act deliberately when impulse urges speed. To choose principle over reaction. Most people never reach this state because they wait for life to change first. Stoicism flips that order. You change first. Life responds later. And even if it doesn't, you remain intact. That is the difference. This is the moment where understanding becomes responsibility. Because once you see this, you cannot unseen it. Every reaction now becomes a choice. Every avoidance becomes visible. Every excuse loses its disguise. Strength stops being something you admire in others. It becomes something you practice quietly. Daily. Deliberately. Without announcement. This is the moment where the mind stops drifting and starts governing. From this point forward, nothing needs to look dramatic. Stoic strength is subtle. It shows up when you pause instead of reacting. When you choose effort without needing motivation. When you act according to your standards, not the crowd's mood. When you let go of what you cannot control without resentment. When you keep moving even when outcomes remain uncertain. This is how the mind rewires itself. Not through sudden transformation. Through consistent alignment. The Stoics were not exceptional because they were fearless. They were exceptional because they trained while others avoided training. They did not wait to feel ready. They built readiness. And that same discipline is available to you. Not tomorrow. Not when life improves. Now. If you take nothing else from this, remember this. You do not need a different life. You need a more disciplined relationship with your own mind. That is where freedom begins. Not in controlling the world. Not in escaping discomfort. Not in collecting approval. But in governing yourself. Let these laws sit with you. Not as ideas to admire but as standards to live by. Revisit them slowly. Apply them deliberately. Allow them to change how you respond before you try to change anything else. If one of these laws challenged you more than the others, that's not an accident. That's where your next level of strength is waiting. If this message resonated with you, pause for a moment. Ask yourself. Which of these laws exposed a weakness I can no longer ignore? Share that reflection in the comments. Not for validation but for commitment. If you want more content built on discipline, clarity, and Stoic self-command, subscribe. Not for motivation but for training. Carry this with you. I do not outsource control of my mind. I choose discipline. Any over impulse. I meet reality with clarity. I am building strength that does not depend on conditions. That is Stoic power. And it is built one deliberate choice at a time.